Marcus Taylor stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the collar of his clean-pressed shirt. His hands moved slowly, carefully. The shirt wasn't new, but it was one of his best. It was the shirt he wore for special days, ceremonies, interviews, or any time he wanted to look his best. And today was special, more than any day in his life. Today, his only son, Jamal Taylor, was graduating high school. For most parents, a high school graduation is just a step. For Marcus, it was everything. He had dreamed of this day for years, since Jamal was just a little boy sitting at the kitchen table doing homework while Marcus cooked dinner after long shifts. He had imagined this moment so many times, but now that the day had finally come, it felt unreal. The morning sun poured through the window of his small house, hitting the old Marine Corps photo on the wall. In it, Marcus stood in uniform, younger, stronger, and serious. That version of him had seen war, lost friends, and carried the weight of leadership. But this version, the man in the mirror, carried something even heavier. The responsibility of being a father. His wife had passed away when Jamal was only 6 years old. Cancer had taken her slowly, painfully. Marcus still remembered holding Jamal's tiny hand at the hospital as Layla whispered goodbye. From that moment on, Marcus knew he had to be everything for Jamal, both mother and father, protector and guide. Raising a child alone wasn't easy. Being a black man, a Marine veteran, and a single parent meant facing judgment from every corner. There were times when money was tight, when Marcus skipped meals so Jamal could eat. He worked long shifts as a mechanic, then cleaned buildings at night just to pay the bills. Still, every evening, he helped Jamal with schoolwork, listened to his stories, and tucked him in. He taught Jamal about discipline, respect, and hard work. But more than anything, he taught him how to walk with pride even when the world didn't seem to care. Now, that little boy had become a young man. Jamal was not just graduating, he was the top of his class, valedictorian. He had earned a scholarship to a top university. All of this was possible because Marcus never gave up. Even in the darkest nights, he had kept going for Jamal. Marcus reached for a small box on his dresser and opened it. Inside was his Marine Corps pin. He stared at it for a moment before placing it carefully in his pocket. He wouldn't wear his uniform today. Didn't want to draw attention to himself. Today was about Jamal, not him. He picked up the car keys and stepped outside. The morning air was fresh, and the birds sang like they were celebrating too. As he drove through the neighborhood, people waved at him. Everyone knew Marcus. He was the quiet man who helped fix cars, shoveled snow for old neighbors, and never said no when someone needed help. At the school, the parking lot was already filling up. Families were arriving, laughing and carrying balloons and flowers. Marcus stepped out of his car and walked toward the auditorium. His steps were steady, but his heart beat faster with every one. He passed through the front entrance and was greeted by the sound of music and voices echoing off the walls. The smell of flowers, perfume, and fresh paper filled the air. Banners hung from the ceiling. "Congratulations, class of 2025. Marcus looked around, searching for a good seat. A woman at a small table smiled and handed him a program. He asked her if the seats were reserved, and she replied kindly that it was first come, first serve. He thanked her and walked inside. The auditorium was large, but the best seats were filling up quickly. Marcus spotted a row near the front, just 5 seats from the stage. He moved quickly and took a seat on the edge. He wanted to be close enough to see Jamal's face when he walked across the stage. As he sat down, he looked around at the other. Families' parents were dressed up, some with cameras, others holding small gifts. Everyone seemed happy. No one looked at him twice. At first, he opened the graduation program and scanned the names. There it was, Jamal Taylor, valedictorian. His throat tightened. A small smile crossed his face. He thought of Layla, how proud she would have been. He whispered, "We did it, baby," and wiped a tear from his eye. The lights dimmed. A little as the ceremony was about to begin. More people entered, filling up the rows. Excitement buzzed in the air. Marcus sat quietly, hands folded, eyes fixed on the stage. Suddenly, he noticed 2 men in dark uniforms approaching. They were school security guards. He looked up, confused. "Sir," one of them said, "these seats are reserved for VIP guests. We'll need you to move to the back." Marcus blinked. "Was told by the lady outside that seating is open?" Second guard frowned. "That doesn't matter. These are marked for district staff and board members. We need you to leave." This row, Marcus remained calm. "I understand. I just wanted to see my son graduate from the front. He's the valedictorian. I came early to get a seat." The first guard crossed his arms. "Sir, we're not going to argue. Please don't make this difficult." People nearby began to glance over. Marcus could feel their eyes on him. A few whispered. He could feel the old familiar tightness in his chest, the one he felt when people judged him before knowing him. He stood slowly, his hands raised slightly in peace. "I don't want any trouble," he said softly. "I'll move." He picked up his program and walked quietly toward the back. The guards didn't offer him help or guidance. They just watched. He found an empty seat in the last row and sat down. The view wasn't good. He could barely see the stage now. His heart ached, not because he cared about seating, but because of the way it happened, like he didn't belong, like he was invisible. He had worn this shirt with pride. He had come to celebrate his son, and in a few cold words, that joy had been taken from him. Up on the stage, the students began to walk in, wearing their caps and gowns. Families clapped and cheered. Marcus tried to smile. He would not let this moment be ruined for Jamal. No. Matter what happened, he would be proud. Backstage, Jamal stood in line with the other top students. He peeked out and searched the crowd for his dad. First, he couldn't find him. Then he saw him sitting all the way in the back, alone. Jamal frowned. That wasn't where his dad had planned to sit. Something was wrong. He quickly texted his best friend Malik, who was already seated. "Why is my dad all the way in the back?" Malik replied a moment later. "Security made him move. Said those front seats were for VIPs." Jamal stared at the message, his hands shaking. His dad wasn't just any parent. He was a Marine, a man who had given up everything for his son. And now he was being treated like an outsider on his sons. Biggest day, Jamal felt a fire rise in his chest. He knew what he had to do. Today wasn't just about grades or speeches. It was about standing up for his father, for the truth, and for everything his family stood for. He took a deep breath and looked out into the crowd again. His dad was sitting still, head down, like he didn't want to draw attention. But Jamal saw him, and he wasn't going to let anyone forget who that man was. The music began playing softly, and everyone in the auditorium turned their heads toward the entrance. A line of students in blue caps and gowns began walking down the center aisle in pairs. Their faces were full of excitement and nervous smiles. Families clapped and took photos, cheering for their sons, daughters, nieces, nephews, and friends. It was a moment of joy for everyone, but Marcus sat in the last row, alone and quiet. His hands rested on his lap, and the graduation program was now folded and placed under his chair. He wasn't looking at the decorations or the smiling parents. His eyes were fixed on the aisle, scanning for Jamal. He spotted him near the middle of the line. He's tall, proud, walking with a confident step. Jamal looked around the room as he entered, searching for his father. When their eyes met, Marcus gave a small nod and a tight smile. Jamal nodded back, but Marcus could see something in his son's face, something different, like he already knew what had happened. Jamal sat with the other honor students in the front 2 rows. His seat had a gold ribbon on it, showing he was the valedictorian. But his thoughts weren't on the award. They were on the way his father had been treated just minutes ago. Even in that packed room, he had noticed the empty seat in the VIP section where his father should have been. The principal stepped onto the stage and welcomed everyone to the graduation. People clapped politely. He spoke about the challenges the students had faced and how proud the school was of their accomplishments. He thanked the school board members, teachers, and parents for their support. But no one mentioned the man sitting quietly in the back, the father who had sacrificed more than anyone else in the room. As the speeches continued, Marcus leaned back in his seat. He tried to keep his emotions hidden, but his heart was heavy. He wasn't angry. He was used to being overlooked, to being misunderstood. Life had taught him how to stay calm when the world was unfair. But this day, this moment, was supposed to be different. It was supposed to be about pride and celebration. Instead, he felt pushed aside. He thought about leaving the auditorium. For a moment, he even stood halfway up. But then he saw Jamal look. Back again from the front row, their eyes met, and Marcus saw the message in his son's gaze. Stay so, he sat back down. He didn't know that others in the room had noticed too. Not just Jamal, not just Malik, but 6 other men sitting quietly. Near the back left of the auditorium, they weren't parents or teachers. They were veterans, strong, silent, watchful. Their names were Mike, David, Carlos, Josh, Ray, and Sam. All of them had served in the military. All of them had fought beside Marcus during a dangerous deployment. In Afghanistan, almost 15 years ago, they had come from different states just for this day. They hadn't told Marcus they were coming. It was supposed to be a surprise. They wanted to be there for him, to stand in the crowd and clap for the man who had saved their lives more than once. Marcus wasn't just their friend. He was their brother, a leader, a hero. When they had entered the auditorium earlier and spotted Marcus near the front row, they had smiled to themselves, proud of him. But when they saw him being approached by the guards and asked to leave, their smiles vanished. They didn't act immediately. Like good soldiers, they observed, they listened. They watched how Marcus calmly followed instructions, even though the treatment was clearly wrong. The look on his face was quiet, but they knew that expression. It was the face of a man swallowing pain, so it wouldn't ruin someone else's day. Mike, the oldest among them, leaned forward and whispered, "Did you see that?" Carlos nodded. He didn't even argue. "He wouldn't," said Josh. "You know how he is. Discipline first, pride second." They all fell silent again, but inside, something had changed. They didn't like what they saw, and they didn't plan to let it end that way. Back on the stage, names were being called. One by one, students walked up, accepted their diplomas, and returned to their seats. The crowd clapped politely after each name. Some families cheered louder than others, shouting their children's names and throwing confetti. Stood at the edges of the auditorium, arms crossed, watching. Marcus stayed seated in the back, his hands never clapping. Not because he wasn't happy for the others, but because all his energy was focused on one person, the announcer read. Jamal Taylor, valedictorian. The room clapped. Some cheered. Jamal stood, walked confidently up the steps, and accepted his diploma. The principal smiled and shook his hand. But Jamal didn't smile back. His eyes quickly searched the back of the room, found his father, and held his gaze. He wanted Marcus to know this diploma wasn't just for him. It was for both of them. As he returned to his seat, the principal tapped the microphone. And now, we'll invite our valedictorian, Jamal Taylor, to give the graduation speech. The room clapped again as Jamal walked to the podium. He looked down at his paper, then looked back up at the crowd. His hands were steady, but his heart was pounding. His original speech was written carefully with jokes and thanks and quotes about success. But he wasn't going to read that today. He looked straight into the crowd and began speaking slowly. Clearly, I wrote a speech about achievement, about hard work, dreams, and school pride. But something happened today that changed what I want to say. The room went quiet. A few teachers looked at each other. The principal tilted his head, unsure. I saw something today that reminded me of the difference between being seen and being respected. My father, Marcus Taylor, a Marine who served this country for over 20 years, came here today to see me graduate. He sat in the front, quietly, proud, and respectful. But 2 security guards asked him to move. A few people began whispering. The guards near the back shifted uncomfortably. They didn't ask anyone else, just him. He didn't argue. Didn't fight, he just moved, because that's the kind of man he is. A man who puts peace before pride. A man who doesn't make a scene, even when the world is unfair. The auditorium was silent now. You could hear a pin drop. I wouldn't be standing here if it wasn't for him. He raised me alone. He worked 2 jobs. He taught me right from wrong, even when we had nothing. And today, he was treated like he didn't belong. A mother in the front row wiped her eyes. A father in the second row put down his phone. I don't want this graduation to be remembered for the wrong reason. But I also can't stay silent. Respect isn't something we give only to certain people in nice clothes or fancy titles. Real respect is for the ones who sacrifice in silence. He paused, then looked directly at the principal. I hope this school remembers that. I hope those guards remember that. I hope this room sees my father not just as a black man in a seat, but as a hero. The crowd remained silent for a long moment. Then slowly, someone in the back stood up. Mike, one of the SEALs. Then all 6 of them rose together. They began walking toward Marcus. People turned to watch. Murmurs spread. No one knew who these men were or why they were moving. But they walked with purpose, strength, and unity. When they reached Marcus, they stopped. Without a word, Mike extended his hand and helped Marcus stand. Then one by one, the men stood in front of him and gave him a full military salute. The crowd gasped. Some began clapping. Others stood too. Within seconds, the entire auditorium rose to their feet. Applause erupted from every corner. The sound echoed off the walls like thunder. Marcus stood frozen for a second. Then his eyes filled with tears. He nodded slowly, overwhelmed. He looked up at Jamal, still standing at the podium, and smiled. Jamal smiled back. In that one moment, the room didn't see a man in the back row. They saw a Marine, father, a man of honor. And they clapped not because of a title, but because of truth. The 6 SEALs escorted Marcus to the front, past the guards who now looked down in shame. They sat him in the front row, where he belonged. No one questioned it. No one dared. Jamal finished his speech with just one line. I am the son of a soldier. And today I graduate with more than a diploma, graduate with pride. The room clapped again, louder than before. That moment would be remembered forever. Not just for the speech or the diploma, but for the silence that turned into strength. For the pain that turned into pride, and for a father who, even when pushed back, stood tall, because the people who truly knew him never let him stand alone. The applause slowly died down, but the feeling in the room stayed heavy. Everyone in the auditorium had seen something powerful a moment that didn't need big words or fancy pictures, just truth. Truth spoken from a young man to the world. Truth that came from love and respect. Many people in the audience were still wiping their eyes. Some were still standing, unsure of what to do next. Others looked toward the back, where the security guards now stood awkwardly, not meeting anyone's eyes. Marcus sat in the front row now. He hadn't asked for it. He hadn't demanded it. But 6 men, his brothers in uniform, had given it to him without asking anyone's permission. He still felt surprised. He had come to this graduation alone, thinking it was just another day of quiet pride. But his fellow soldiers had shown up, and now the whole world had seen what kind of man he was. Jamal was still on stage. The principal had walked over and whispered something to him, but Jamal just nodded politely and stepped aside. He didn't want to talk anymore. His words had already done their job. He walked off the stage and went to sit next to his friends, but his eyes kept going back to his dad. Marcus gave him a small nod. That small nod meant everything. It said, "You did good, son. You made me proud." The rest of the graduation went on, but the energy in the room had changed. No one clapped the same way. The speeches that followed felt smaller, like shadows after a big fire. Teachers spoke, awards were handed out, but people's minds were elsewhere. They were thinking about what they had seen, about a man who had been quietly pushed to the back, and how that same man was now sitting in front because others stood beside him in the side seats. The 6 Navy SEALs sat tall and serious. They weren't wearing their uniforms, but their posture. Their eyes and their presence told everyone who they were. They had served in deserts, jungles, and war zones. But this moment right here in a high school auditorium felt just as important to them, because they knew Marcus. It's not the version people saw today, quiet and polite, but the version who had once dragged 2 of them out of enemy fire. The man who stayed behind during an ambush to protect a wounded soldier. The man who gave up promotions so others could lead. Marcus had never asked for recognition, never told anyone what he did, but his actions lived inside their hearts forever. Mike, the oldest SEAL, leaned over to Carlos and whispered, "This man deserved that front row before anyone else in this room." Carlos nodded. "He's the reason I'm alive," Ray, sitting beside them, added, "and yet they tried to treat him like he was nothing." They looked toward the guards at the side. One of them was talking into a radio, looking confused and worried. The other had his arms crossed, but his face looked different now. Not proud, not in control, just nervous. A few school officials had gathered near the back, whispering with each other. They were clearly unsure what to do. What could they do? The truth had already been spoken in front of hundreds of people. Cameras had recorded it. Phones had captured every second. There was no way to erase it now. Meanwhile, Marcus sat still. He didn't clap. He didn't look angry. He just watched quietly. A part of him felt overwhelmed, not because of the hurt he had faced much worse, but because he had not expected to be honored like this. He had spent so much of his life walking alone, not because he wanted to, but because he didn't like trouble. He had always believed that actions speak louder than words. Now his actions had returned to him through the voices of others, his son, and his old brother's dash and dash arms. As the ceremony neared its end, the principal stepped back on the stage. He cleared his throat, then looked directly at Marcus. His voice was nervous, but careful. "Before we close, I want to take a moment to thank someone special who's with us today," he said. "Mr. Marcus Taylor, father of our valedictorian, is a retired United States Marine who served our country for more than 2 decades. We thank him not only for his service, but for the example he has set for our students and this community." Some people clapped, others didn't. It was too late for some. The apology felt forced, a bit too polished. But Marcus nodded politely. He didn't clap for himself. He didn't need applause, just wanted his son to know he had shown up. That was enough. After the ceremony ended, people began leaving their seats. Families walked up to the stage for pictures. Balloons were tied to chairs. Children ran around with flowers in gift bags. Jamal pushed through the crowd and reached his father. The moment their eyes met, Jamal dropped his diploma case and hugged his father tight. "I'm sorry, Dad," he whispered. "I didn't know they'd treat you like that." Marcus patted his son's back. "You don't have to be sorry for anything, son." He stood up. "That means everything." "I couldn't stay quiet," Jamal said, stepping back, his eyes wet. "Not after everything you've done for me?" Marcus looked at his son's face, the same eyes Layla had, the same fire she used to show when someone was wronged. He smiled. "Your mom would be proud of you." The SEALs joined them, one by one. They clapped Jamal on the shoulder and shook Marcus's hand. "You raised a strong one," Josh said. Marcus nodded. "He's stronger than I ever was." "Don't say that," Mike replied. "Without you, none of us would be standing here." A teacher walked by and stopped to talk to Marcus, then another. A small group had formed around him, people who had watched silently before, but now wanted to say something. Some offered apologies, some offered thanks. A few even asked if they could take a photo with him. Marcus didn't want attention, but he understood what was happening. People were waking up. They were seeing a man they had ignored before. The guards stood far away now. One of them left through the side exit. The other stayed, looking down, pretending to be busy. The school's assistant principal came over. Was a kind-faced woman who had taught Jamal in 10th grade. She looked directly at Marcus. "I'm sorry," she said. "What happened today wasn't right. We're going to talk to the security company. And I've already requested your name be added to the official guest list for future events." Marcus simply said, "Thank you." He didn't smile or frown. He just nodded. Later, as the crowd thinned out, the SEALs gathered with Marcus outside, under a large tree. Jamal stood nearby, holding a small gift bag from one of his classmates. It had chocolates, a card, and a keychain that said Class of 2025. Carlos lit a small cigar and offered one to Marcus. "You remember that night in Kandahar?" he asked with a laugh. "When you told that colonel we'd hold the checkpoint no matter what?" Marcus laughed for the first time that day. "And then the truck ran out of fuel, and we were stuck behind enemy lines for 12 hours. Everyone laughed. Even Jamal chuckled, though he didn't know the full story. Ray said. "We've been through a lot. I've never seen you lose. Your temper? Not once. That's what makes you who you are." Marcus took a deep breath. It's not about holding back. It's about choosing your battles. And today wasn't my fight to lead. Jamal stepped closer, but it was mine. Everyone nodded. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, Marcus looked at his son standing among the seals. A young man, full of heart and courage, surrounded by warriors who had faced death and come out stronger. He realized something that moment. He had spent years protecting Jamal from the world. Now, Jamal was ready to protect others. That evening they went home. Together. No fancy restaurant, no big party, just family. The seals came over too. They grilled burgers in Marcus's backyard, laughed over old stories, and drank soda out of plastic cups. Marcus sat back in his old chair and watched Jamal joke with the others. He looked so comfortable with them, like he had always been part of their group. Mike turned to Marcus. "You know, we may be soldiers, but he's the one who led today." Marcus smiled quietly. "Yeah," he said. "He led with truth." Jamal sat on the edge of his bed that night, holding the graduation program in his hands. It was folded now, soft at the corners, but he held it like it was made of gold. His phone buzzed with messages. Classmates, teachers, even some strangers who had seen the video online were texting him, saying how powerful his speech was. But Jamal wasn't thinking about his phone. He kept replaying the scene in his mind, his father being told to move, the seals standing up, and the way the whole auditorium had gone quiet when he spoke. He looked over at the photo on his desk. A picture of him and his dad from when he was 10, standing outside a car shop, both covered in grease and smiling. That day they had fixed an old engine together. Jamal had always admired his dad's hands, strong, scarred, always steady. He had fixed more than just cars with those hands, he had fixed life. In the next room, Marcus sat on the couch. The house was quiet now. The seals had gone. They had hugged him tightly, slapped his back, and promised to return soon. The backyard still smelled faintly of smoke from the small fire pit they had sat around. Laughter still echoed in his ears. But now that everything was calm, Marcus found himself lost in thought. He wasn't sure how to feel. He was proud, of course prouder than he had ever been. But he also felt heavy. He had spent his whole life staying low, avoiding attention, living with dignity and silence. That day at the graduation had pulled all those quiet years into one loud moment. And now, people saw him differently. He wasn't used to being seen. Across town, the school principal sat in his office late into the night, watching the video someone had uploaded of Jamal's speech. It had already been shared thousands of times. Parents, veterans, students, people from all over the country were commenting, sharing, reacting. Some were angry at the guards. Others were inspired by Jamal's words. Most were shocked that such a thing had happened at a high school graduation. The principal rubbed his eyes. He had not expected any of this. He had tried to fix it with a public thank you on stage, but it clearly wasn't enough. The truth was, he had known something felt wrong when the guards approached Marcus, but he hadn't acted. He had stayed quiet now. That silence felt like failure. The next morning, Marcus woke early as usual. The sun had just begun to rise, and the sky was a soft orange. He made himself a cup of coffee and stood by the window, watching birds hop around the yard. Everything felt peaceful. For a moment, he forgot about the ceremony, the speech, the guards, the crowd, but the knock on the door brought him back. He opened it to find a man in a dark suit holding a folder. "Mr. Marcus Taylor," the man asked politely. "Yes, I'm with the local news. I was hoping I could ask you a few questions about what happened at your son's graduation." Marcus frowned slightly. "I don't talk to cameras." The reporter nodded, understanding. "That's what your son said you'd say." Marcus raised an eyebrow. The man smiled. "We already interviewed Jamal. He said if we wanted the real story, we should talk to you. But if you didn't want to, speak," he said. "That was your right." He said you taught him that silence can be powerful too. Marcus gave a small nod. He's learning. Later that day, more calls came. Veterans groups, old friends, news outlets. Even a senator's office called to offer thanks. One message stood out. It was from a retired general who said, "Men, like you remind us what real honor looks like." But Marcus didn't answer any of them. He wasn't interested in fame, didn't want interviews. He just wanted people to treat each other better. At the school, things were changing fast. The guards who had confronted Marcus were suspended. An investigation had begun. Teachers and students were talking openly about bias and respect. One of Jamal's classmates started a petition to make a new rule: all military veterans attending school events should be given a place of honor. Jamal didn't expect that. He didn't ask for it. It made him smile when he heard about it. The next week, the school invited Marcus and Jamal to a small private meeting. Jamal didn't want to go, but Marcus told him they should. Inside the school library, a circle. Oh, if chairs had been set up. The principal, assistant principal to board members, and the head of the security team were there. Marcus and Jamal sat down quietly. Mr. Taylor, the principal, began. "We want to apologize again face to face. What happened at the graduation was unacceptable. We are reviewing all security policies, and we want your input." Marcus looked at the group. He didn't speak right away. He just studied their faces. Finally, he said, "You don't need my input. You need to remember one thing. Respect doesn't come from a badge or a job title. It comes from how you treat people, especially when nobody's watching." The room stayed quiet. The security team leader stood up. He was a big man with a shaved head and tired eyes. "I wasn't there that day," he said, "but I watched the video. And I was ashamed. I've already spoken to the guards. One of them has stepped down. The other asked to meet you personally." Marcus looked at him. "I don't need an apology from someone who didn't mean it the first time." Jamal placed a hand on his dad's arm. "It's okay. You've already said enough." They left the meeting shortly after. There was no photo, no handshake. Just truth. Later that day, Marcus and Jamal went to the local diner. They sat in their usual booth. The waitress, who had known them for years, smiled as she handed them menus. "On the house today," she said, placing 2 plates of pancakes in front of them. Marcus looked surprised. "You didn't have to do that." "Not," she said, "but I wanted to." Other people in the diner nodded at Marcus as he walked out. Some clapped him on the shoulder. A few thanked him, not loudly, just quietly. And that was how he liked it. Back home, Jamal was thinking hard. He had always planned to study engineering. He had the scholarship, he had the grades. But after everything that happened, something inside him shifted. He walked into the living room where Marcus was polishing an old photo frame. "Dad," Marcus looked up, "I think I want to study law." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Law?" Jamal nodded. "I want to be the kind of person who changes the rules, not just follows them. I want to fight the right way." Marcus looked at his son for a long moment. Then he smiled. "That's a good fight to choose." Jamal smiled back. "You taught me how." That night, Jamal opened his laptop and started looking at pre-law programs. Marcus sat beside him, not saying much, just watching. He was proud not just because his son had big dreams, but because those dreams came from a place of strength and truth in another town miles away. One of the SEALs sat in his garage, watching the graduation video again. He had watched it 10 times already. Each time, he felt the same chill when the 6 of them stood and saluted Marcus. He didn't post online. He didn't talk to the news. But he wrote one short post on a private Veterans Forum. A brother was disrespected in silence, but truth stood up and made noise. That's what honor looks like. That's what service is about. Dozens of comments followed, some from soldiers, some from strangers. All of them thanked Marcus for his quiet strength, for his example. Days passed, but the memory of that moment didn't fade. In classrooms, teachers brought it up in discussions about justice. In homes, parents talked to their kids about respect. In training rooms, security officers were taught to ask questions instead of making assumptions. And somewhere in the middle of it all, a father and son sat on a porch in a quiet neighborhood. Watching the sun go down, Jamal turned to his dad. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked. "Serving, sacrificing so much?" Marcus thought for a moment. "No," he said. because it made me who I am, and it gave me you." Jamal leaned back and looked at the sky. The stars were just starting to appear. "I think people saw the real you that day." Marcus shook his head slowly. "No," he said. "He saw the real us. A father, a son, and a truth that couldn't be ignored. And that was enough." The days after the graduation passed quietly, but the impact of that day continued to ripple through Marcus and Jamal's lives. The story had spread beyond their small town. People from different states, veterans, students, even strangers, who never met Marcus or Jamal, reached out to them. Letters, emails, and messages came in. Some shared their own stories of struggle and respect. Others simply said thank you for showing what real courage and dignity looked like. Marcus was surprised. He never expected the world to notice him. He had lived his life in the background, quietly doing his duty, raising his son the best way he could. But now he found himself at the center of a conversation that was bigger than he had imagined. Jamal, too, was changed. His graduation speech had opened a door to new possibilities. He was no longer just a student with good grades. He was someone with a voice, a young man ready to speak up for justice and fairness. The scholarship he earned still waited for him, but his heart was pulling him in a new direction, one that could help others who faced injustice. One evening, Marcus and Jamal sat on their porch, watching the sunset paint the sky with warm colors. The air was cool and calm. They talked quietly about the future, their hopes, their dreams, the challenges ahead. Marcus remembered the night he first enlisted in the Marines. He was young, full of energy, and ready to serve his country. Back then, he never thought about the battles he would fight, the friends he would lose, or the scars he would carry, both outside and inside. Now, looking at his son, Marcus realized that the real fight was not just on distant battlefields, it was also here at home, in everyday moments, in the way people treated each other. In the courage it took to stand up when the world didn't want to listen, Jamal turned to his father and said, "Dad, I want to do something meaningful. Not just for me, but for everyone who doesn't get the respect they deserve." Marcus smiled. "You already are." They both knew it would not be easy. Change never is. But they felt stronger together. A few weeks later, Marcus was invited to speak at a community event honoring veterans. Wasn't sure if he wanted to. Public speaking had never been his thing. But when Jamal encouraged him, reminding him of the power of sharing stories, he agreed. That night, in a crowded hall filled with faces both familiar and new, Marcus stood up to speak. His voice was steady but gentle as he told the story of his son's graduation, of the moment when respect was denied and then restored by those who knew the real meaning of honor. He spoke about sacrifice, about the quiet strength it takes to keep going, and about the power of family when he finished. The audience rose in applause. Some wiped tears from their eyes. Marcus felt something he hadn't felt in a long time, the warmth of connection. It wasn't about recognition or fame. It was about being seen and heard, being understood. Jamal was proud of his father. He knew that the man who stood before the crowd was the same man who fixed engines late at night, who quietly carried burdens without complaint, who loved his son more than anything. The story didn't end there. Jamal went on to study law, just as he had said he would. He threw himself into his studies with determination, fueled by the experience of standing up for his father. He joined clubs that fought for civil rights and volunteered at legal aid centers. Each day, he worked to make a difference, small or large. Marcus continued his life with quiet dignity. The recognition from the community didn't change who he was. He still woke early, worked hard, and cared deeply for those around him. But now, when people saw him, they saw not just a Marine veteran, but a man whose strength came from love and resilience. Their family grew closer. Laughter filled their home more often. Friends and old comrades stopped by to share meals and stories. The 6 SEALs who had stood up for Marcus at the graduation stayed in touch, becoming a second family. One afternoon, Jamal came home with exciting news. He had been accepted into a prestigious law school, one known for its focus on social justice. Marcus was overjoyed. He remembered the sacrifices they had made to reach this point, the nights of worry, the struggles, the moments when hope felt distant. But now, hope was shining bright. As Jamal packed his bags for college, Marcus helped him prepare, buying books, filling out forms, and offering quiet advice. He told Jamal stories of the Marines, of teamwork, and of the importance of standing for what is right. Jamal listened carefully, understanding that those lessons were not just about the past, but about the future he was building. Before leaving, Jamal hugged his father tightly. "Thank you, Dad, for everything." Marcus smiled, eyes moist. "No, son. Thank you." Years later, Jamal became a lawyer, known for fighting discrimination and defending the rights of the underprivileged. He used his voice to speak for those who often had none. His reputation grew, but he never forgot where he came from. The lessons from his father, the courage from the Marines. And the day 6 SEALs stood up to silence a room, Marcus watched his son's success with pride. Not just because of the achievements, but because Jamal remained kind, humble, and true to himself. In the quiet moments, Marcus often thought about the graduation day, the fear, the pain, and then the triumph. He knew that day was more than a ceremony. It was a turning point, a reminder that respect and dignity are not given lightly, earned through courage, kindness, and standing together. He also knew something else, that a father's love, even in the hardest times, could change the world, and with that thought, Marcus felt peace.